Welcome to our Voice of Supply Chain show brought to you by ISM New Jersey and SourceDay. The purpose of our show is to tell stories of people in supply chain doing extraordinary things. I am your host, Sarah Scudder. I oversee marketing for SourceDay. Our supply chain software prevents late supplier deliveries for manufacturers to prevent their production lines from getting shut down. If you want more intel on what's happening in the supply chain manufacturing world, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and follow my hashtags Manufacturing Maven and Women in ERP. Today, our guest is John. I have known him now for a few months. He is part of a meetup group that I host and run twice a month and has just been a wealth of knowledge in the logistics and freight and transportation space in our group. So I thought he's been doing some really, really cool things in that space. And we haven't necessarily had somebody come on before that's focused on logistics and getting parts and materials from point A to B. So I thought he would be a really good guest. So John, as our typical show format, the purpose is we're going to kind of walk through and tell your personal story and the journey throughout your life and career. So I like to go way back in time, and we're going to start from the very, very beginning. So back to some childhood days. And I would like to have you start by sharing a favorite childhood memory with us.
Okay, thank you for having me. I think one of the favorite ones I had growing up in New England was, once school was being out and going to like Hampton Beach. So anyone that is up in that area, it was kind of a staple that as soon as school was done, it was always going to be like going to the beaches and so forth, which is usually right around 4th of July because up there schools didn't get out till late June because of snow days. So I think one of the favorite memories was as a kid was always being able, knowing that time for the beach was coming up and looking forward to it.
We have people trickling in, looks like from all over the globe. So drop us a note in the comments and tell us where you're joining us from. It is lunchtime for most people. So tell us what you are going to have for lunch today as well. I see we've got someone joining us from SAP. We've got Kathy joining us. She's out and about today as well. So welcome to the show. And again, don't be shy about putting a note in the comments as we talk about John's journey. So beaches, 4th of July, love that. What in your childhood would you say shaped you to be the person that you are today?
I would think most of it would be kind of like, I would say it like the family bonds, because, we had cousins all over the place, but one thing that always stood was the bonds with the family. And to me that, everyone was willing to jump in and help each other out when there was time. And I kind of transferred that into, my positions today where I'm always happy to jump in and help somebody out. I mean, we have mutual connections that I'll jump on calls, helping them with logistics or helping them with job interview questions that they're doing. It's just something that always shaped me that, in having that belief that the strength of a leader is the strength of his team. And that you really need that bond with, the people you work with every day. And I think that kind of character trait has helped, me be, what I'm doing today.
So, John, we have folks from Orlando, Florida. We've got Tom Grossman joining us from Vegas, and Rodrigo, who followed instructions almost to a T, is joining us from Miami and is having a turkey wrap. Rodrigo, I am a vegetarian, so I'd say good on the wrap minus the turkey with some tofu.
A lot of Florida people on here. I'm over in the Tampa Clearwater area, so.
We've got Andrew joining us from New Jersey. So your East Coast tribe is joining us today. John, who is the most influential person in your childhood and why?
That would be my grandmother on my dad's side. She was she ruled with an iron fist, matriarch of the family. My grandfather was, career Marine. He was World War II, Vietnam, Korea. So she was raising all the kids, lived on military bases. but she would always, you were always fed, you were always, you could do those things. But, she was, everyone was afraid of her at the same time that they loved her. And I think that's kind of the one that I always saw, was that she would always help you out, but she was very strict in what she expected of you. And there was no deviation of that.
Grandma knows best. I can say the same for my memers.
Yes.
She will tell you like it is, no matter who you are.
And I hear about the beer time. We have to slide some things around for Memers beer, so we got to have that.
Happy hour is now at 4 o'clock instead of 5, per her new bedtime.
There you go.
So John, you have a family.
Mm-hmm.
What is one childhood tradition that you've continued on with your family today that you actually learned or acquired from childhood?
I think, most of the traditions were just, being, your word is everything, that you can, if you say you're going to do something, you need to do it. And I saw that from, a younger age with family all the way up to my kids now. Like, if you're going to do something, do it, say you're going to do it, and follow through. Don't say you're going to do it and not be able to do it, because you need to be relied on for that. And that I tell them that's how it translates into the career today. Like, if I go and tell my boss that I'm going to handle it, she doesn't have to worry, because every time that she's asked me to do something before, it's been done. And I'll provide a feedback. Yes, hey, we're circling back to this. This is completed. This is where everything stands. Mm-hmm. So there's never that question of the dependability and reliability. And I think that, needs to be hold true a lot more today than, in the past. But it's one of the biggest things I can say to, to my kids.
So what did you think you wanted to do after high school?
In high school, it was funny because originally I didn't want to be an engineer. I wanted to be an architect. So my original thing was trying to be an architect. So it was one of those things that I always loved, math and science. And, I did the robotics competition, which was US first at the time, but now called first. And it was just a love of engineering and design. And so I kind of just wanted to be able to have something that would stand, that people would see years down the road, long after I was gone. So it was, and plus, at the time in high school and college, I was just happy to find something that I'd have a job making decent money. Because going in college and living off of, ramen noodles and, food, the food from the commissary at the colleges, you had a desire for some better things every once in a while. I think that was one of the biggest things, is just something that you were able to do to make a change, to make a difference that would help others.
So what was the most important thing that you learned in college?
I would say showing up, because most of the time in colleges, and I'm sure it's still today as it was when 20 plus years ago when I was at UMass Lowell, was you would actually fail if you didn't show up to your classes. Like, you couldn't just show up when you wanted to. It was, you had like 3 absences, then that was it. It was an automatic failure. But I think by showing up, because a lot of times people don't grasp something very easily. It doesn't, some things don't come to people naturally. But by showing up every single day and plugging away, I had a professor that, it was his biggest thing, as especially as a freshman in engineering, was just show up every day, give me everything you got. And at the end of it, if you don't understand it, we can circle back. But by showing up every day and not trying to rely on yourself in your dorm room trying to do this, it allowed you to be able to understand things better. You were able to talk to other people. So it was kind of just showing up and making that effort every day, that you're not going to just immediately get everything. And that has to carry through even to today, that you can jump in a position that you're not going to get everything right away. But by showing up every day, you learn more and more, and you have a better grasp of that, down the road.
So we've got several more folks joining us. We've got Wanda from Arizona. Oh, it's probably super, super toasty in Arizona. I see. I'm in Cali this week, and it's pretty warm here. Eric is somebody that I met at the ISM conference when I lobby crashed last week. So hello, Eric, looking tan as ever. And our dear friend Rachel, repping Northeast from New York. She had coffee and a protein bar for lunch.
Breakfast of champions.
That's exactly right. So, John, what did you think you were going to do after college. So you were in college going into engineering, and what did you think you were going to do after you graduated?
I mean, originally you kind of have the, when you work, especially in your internships, you get the scared straight stories from other people you work with. So it was a mix of, you weren't sure if you're just going to be in a corner all the time doing work or out in the field, and as an engineer, it was, I had a good mix of the company I was at. So it was able to say, okay, I'm doing this work in the desk, but then I'm able to apply it out in the field, and going out and seeing job sites and so forth. So it was, I had an impression of what I wanted it to be. And a lot of times I think that's where a lot of times when people in engineering stray from that, is that you go into it with a thought process and then you realize you're doing it every day going, okay, I don't want to do this, kind of a thing. And it's nothing wrong, but it was just until you're actually doing it every single day for a length of time, then you start to realize, okay, maybe this isn't what I wanted. And then it allows you to make those pivots, in your career.
So I think it's a little bit interesting in your background. So you majored in engineering. You did kind of what I would say a traditional path. You started right out of college as an engineer, but then you pivoted pretty quickly to become a warehouse manager. So
Yes.
Not a lot of times have I heard engineer to warehouse manager. So why the pivot?
It was actually a pivot to go work with my father. My father was helping run a nonprofit. They were sending educational textbooks to third world countries. And, he was very good in, he grew up construction demolition. So he knew a lot of stuff. He knew, a lot of the trucking guys, but connecting those dots. So I had the opportunity to go and work with him and taking on the entire warehouse operation and learning. That's how I kind of cut my teeth shipping internationally. And we're talking some of the, very war-torn parts of the world, your Sierra Leone, Nigeria. And so I was able to get that work, but at the same time, I was able to work with my father, which was something that not many people get that opportunity to. So it was something that when I had that pivot, it was, hey, I need, when else am I going to be able to say I get to work alongside my dad? And it's something that was important to me to try to do, and knowing that that was a learning area that I wanted to pivot in, because as I was doing logistics and taking it on, it seemed like a good fit, and then making a difference in the world. I still get cards from people that were in the school. I mean, at the time they were in grade school, but I've gotten cards from people that graduated from colleges in the US that were learning in other parts of the world, and like Africa, that were able to come to the US and go to college. And I helped have a part of that, and like get out, you'll get a card, or I'll get something, an email, because I still have the same email, from someone saying, thank you for, making that difference.
So you worked for your dad,
Mm-hmm.
then you dabbled in a few different things: real estate, logistics, and supply chain. And then you started your own logistics company. Tell me
Yes.
about that.
Well, I think, part of the change, obviously the multiple jobs was at that time was right when I had kids. So, underestimating the cost of children. So it was kind of doing multiple things at one time to provide. But, the logistics business came as a need when I was in the biotech pharmaceutical, seeing that a lot of companies, your manufacturing companies work 3 shifts, but trucking deliveries stopped at 4:00. So all of a sudden, if somebody needed something for that second or third shift, it wasn't going to come into the next day. So production was getting pushed. So I kind of started this, niche area of, if you're open, I'm open, and then helping transport stuff, because I would, if they were open, it didn't matter. You were able to move these things 24/7. And a lot of companies really appreciated that they could send you something at 10, 11 o'clock in the afternoon and say, hey, this is going to be ready at 2 or 3. Can you pick it up and have it here by 7 o'clock by, the second or third shift starting? Yeah, no problem. And being able to fill that niche area that I wasn't competing against the big players in the mix, I was able to operate in those little niche areas. And then it was even delivering, medical supplies to nursing homes. So one of the biggest parts was basically from Maine to Virginia was delivering the medicines that all the nursing homes give to the residents. So if a resident comes back and they went to the hospital. The doctor changes their meds. All the meds that they have on that cart for that person are now no longer good. So now they needed a new set of meds, and a lot of times they needed it in 2 to 3 hours or less. And it was, okay, go pick up at the big, commercial grade pharmacy and deliver to the nursing homes 24/7. Because at the same time, the way I always looked at it was, it's somebody's relative, it's somebody's family member. Like, you need to look at that delivery, that even though you may not want to get up out of bed at 1 o'clock in the morning when they're calling you saying you're going to take a 2-hour drive to the Cape, but it makes a difference in someone's livelihood day to day. It was something that I was really proud of doing. The biggest headache that comes from it is you're a one-man operation. There is no backup. You don't have days off. You don't get to take a vacation. You can't give it a call service. It was all funneling through to my phone 24/7.
So you were a solo entrepreneur then?
Yes. And then I was basically having all the independent contractors work for me that were doing the deliveries as well.
So how long did you survive with that schedule?
2-3 years. And that's when you're driving 70, 80,000 miles on a car. 2-3 states in one day was not uncommon. Maine, New Hampshire, Mass, Connecticut, Rhode Island. It was, you had to run the gambit, but at the same time, you were really making a difference. So it was stressful, but I was happy to alleviate that after a while. There's only so much you can do with that.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully you were charging a premium if you're providing that kind of service.
It was actually a flat rate, which made it much easier for the companies to deal with. So they knew exactly what their costs were if they were going to make a request. It wasn't, can you send me a quote? It was, here's your multiplier, here's what it is, here's the service charge, flat rate. So they knew, and a lot of the big commercial pharmaceutical companies loved that because it was a fixed cost. Every 60 or 90 days you might revamp it, but it was a fixed cost. So they knew if this nursing home was X amount of miles from the facility and it was this time of day, here's the charge.
Mm-hmm.
So they could easily factor that in without having, and it wasn't an unknown when you did the billing, because when you're dealing with independent contractors, you were paying every week. So you couldn't have that, oh, I'm going to pay you, every 2 weeks, 30 days. It was, you were paying everybody weekly. And so that invoice really needed to match.
I just imagine a picture of you driving a U-Haul truck around.
Oh, it was between the personal vehicle, cargo van, box trucks. A lot of times you were renting those last minute because you were and some of the times you were picking up from like a big Cardinal Health facility and delivering to the commercial pharmacy. So nothing's more nerve-wracking than you got about $2-3 million worth of pharmaceutical pills in the back bed of a truck and you're driving down the highway.
Mm-hmm. So what did you do next? You had your own company. You got probably no sleep for 2 to 3 years, driving.
That's when I transitioned to the company SMS, was that they did a lot of IT work. They were doing stuff just outside of the warranty. So if you bought a new computer, you get a 1-2 year warranty. They were selling maintenance contracts that allowed them, but it was a problem that I like to solve because in addition to that, domestic, it was also an international piece. So if a company in Spain had their hard drive go down, we had 4 hours or less to get them operational 24/7. So it was really cool to be able to design or strategize where inventory needed to be based on usage, based on the products they had. So I was really able to jump in and kind of, go run with it. And it was a steep learning curve, make a lot of mistakes along the way, but you're not making a difference if you're not willing to take a risk, in there. But dealing with, countries where I was dealing with India, Spain, even in Australia sometimes is very difficult, doing stuff in that nature because of the distance that they are away from certain things, but strategically locating where inventory needed to be in order to make that SLA. To help with the sales guys, and then a lot of domestic shipping, taking stuff out. What we call white glove, which was, you have to go in and send a team of people to take out these computer systems. You had to put plywood down on the floor to not pop tiles, kind of a thing, or ruin a carpet. It was a lot of, interesting requests. And the good thing is a lot of these people that I work with then I'm still very friendly with now. I've actually done jobs with them that even though they're at other companies, they've actually done some work for me currently in data center relocations and so forth. So it's been a great thing knowing that you have those friends and those connections that have come along the way with you, even though you may be at respectively different companies now, but having worked together and know how each other operate, it's, you know, it's always a great thing to either make that request or get a request saying, hey, can you help me?
So at SMS, your job was what, to oversee transportation and logistics?
Yes.
Okay. From there, you went to Amazon.
Yes.
That's kind of a big move, a big company, very controversial.
And no, I think what, you know, a big part of what drove me there, and it's something we see in our respective industries that a lot of companies don't do, was unrelenting pursuit of customer satisfaction. You know, everything, one thing that anyone can, you know, good, bad, or whatever someone says about Amazon, one of the things that's always held true is their ability to do customer satisfaction, trying to make the, you know, you look at years ago, you might have 3-day shipping and it went to 2-day to 1-day to same day. Everything they've done is re-engineered to go to that customer satisfaction. And that was one of the big reasons I went there. Now I stepped out of my comfort zone. I became an operations manager there. And that really wasn't, I don't want to say, it was still logistics, but not really logistics. And that's kind of where, you know, it was, as an operations manager, you were running the entire facility. So you would show up and you say, okay, we have to do 400,000 packages that day. You were creating the game plan of what each shift needed to do, where you needed the people, where, you know, and then you had some area managers that reported to you, but you would run them in 2 different shifts. You know, Amazon, we had some crazy hours. I used to work what was called back half, which was Wednesday to Saturday, you know, 7 to 7. So it was very interesting. It was an incredible learning experience. You know, and it's interesting to see something to go from a company that at the time was small compared to Amazon, and then going to these, like a behemoth, when you're looking at almost 1 million square feet, you know, 2 different forms of delivery, 1,500 people in the building in an average shift. And you have to be that quarterback to keep everything moving.
So what did you do at Amazon? What was your role there?
I was what was called an operations manager. So at any given time, you have you have your GM or your site lead, and then the operations manager on shift was actually running you were running the day to day. So when everyone coming in, you were saying, okay, you know, day shift needs to do X amount of packages. I got 400 people. I need 100 here, 50 here, 20 here. You were creating that game plan in order to get to that number. And then you were relying on your area managers to help push that through. And then operations managers, we work with each other to say, okay, I'm running day twice shift. You're going to have night and overnight shift. I need to make sure I don't leave you too much. You know, because if I failed in my shift, it made more work for the guy, you know, whoever was coming after me in shift. And you were trying to have that constant communication to stay on target, because one little headache, you know, for instance, in New England, you get a blizzard. Well, then a truck can't show up. A truck not showing up, or lightning storms, the yard shut down. Anything within a certain miles of the facility is shut down. Wind over 20 miles an hour, shut down. So the minute you missed a number, it was affecting the people that came after you. So it was always trying to be vigilant of that. And I think that's kind of why a lot of people lose sight of that. It gets very difficult. And also where some people make the news, if you will, when doing unsafe things, because they weren't thinking about it correctly, but they were just doing what they thought was the correct move. But it made people work in, you know, potentially an unsafe condition.
What was the most surprising part of working at Amazon?
I think it's just the sheer pace and volume. Like as a manager, if you were walking in, you were looking up at the floor and you're looking down at everyone working, just seeing how many moving parts have to happen in order to get that package out the door. Like from the time it comes in the door, you know, many times if a truck was showing in and it was delivering a package into the facility, I would say within 5 hours, it was it would be getting ready to leave the facility. So you were bringing it in, filtering it out. It would go by certain zip codes, or whether it was the postal service or the next final mile delivery that you were going out to the vans. You were being able to see just the enormity of that in dealing with that day to day, but also just the volume. I mean, some of these centers, you know, 1 million packages a day is not uncommon. You know, so when you just think about the sheer volume of what you have to ship day to day in your current job to one facility that has to do 1 million packages a day, or, and failure is not an option. And I think that's one of the challenges that I loved about it and loved working with the people that I had there. And even so, I had a former intern of mine that actually went to join Amazon after I did. And now he's doing very well up in Seattle as a project manager.
What was the most important leadership lesson you learned working at Amazon?
I would say is the accountability. People, like, one of the things, the principles there is being right. And a lot of times in that respective position, you need to be right. So the call that you make, if you made a wrong call, a lot of people were going to be affected. If you chose a number wrong, you ran the wrong number of people on a certain line, you missed your numbers. Now, everyone, the shift coming behind us, had to do more work because we couldn't do what we needed to do. So the accountability, but also that Amazon let you have that accountability. It wasn't like you were being micromanaged. It was, hey, you got a job to do it. Yes, communicate it if it's a problem, but other than that, just go get it done. And they relied on you to do that. And I think that's where, a lot of the challenges come from. And I think that a lot of people either thrive on it or burn out from it.
Mm-hmm. So you were at Amazon, I want to say, over 3 years.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's a long time for people that I know that work at Amazon. 3 years is on the upper end, I would say. And now you run logistics for a company called AAMP.
Yes.
So why did you decide to leave Amazon, and tell me what you're doing now in your current role?
As my current role now, I'm the director of logistics for AMP Global. A lot of what we do is your vehicle telematics. We actually outfit most of the Amazon vehicles. So the cameras, the telematics that they use are ours. Also, we have different brands. So anyone that's a Jeep enthusiast knows the Stinger off-road brand. Those are the cameras that you have for the pitch and roll of the vehicle, seeing outside of the vehicle, lights, radios. So some of the radios we have and the large touch screens that you see in the vehicles today are ones that we do. And I actually came here because someone that I worked with at Philips Lighting, which is now Signify, was a VP here. And, basically I had run into him and he's like, why are you in Florida? And at the time I was like, hey, I'm helping launch centers for, do these for Amazon. He's like, well, we do work for Amazon. And he's like, I need to talk to you. And at Signify, one of the specialties I did was operational efficiency. So it was reducing ocean lead time from vendors in the Asia regions, China, Hong Kong, into the facilities in California, and also cost. So cost efficiency, contract negotiations from either the freight and vendor, ocean air freight, all the way to like your UPS, FedEx, DHL. And that's when he was like, I need you. I need you to come work for me again and do what you did. He's like, we're way up here. Like, I think when I joined, they were at like 75 day transit time, and probably $19,000, $20,000 a container. I averaged all of Q4 and now into Q1, averaging 31 day transit from China to delivery to our facility in California. And then obviously ocean rates have come down, but I'm probably $1,500, $1,600 a container. And then obviously you have your transport costs, but like all in maybe $2,000-3,000, which is a far difference from where, they were. And I think that's kind of where I specialize in, is the areas that, not that anyone was doing something wrong, but because as they grew and they had growing pains, they didn't have the bandwidth to focus on these areas. And I think that's where most companies don't see a true logistics person. And I think it wasn't until like a post-COVID scenario that real logistics supply chain people were able to come in and make a difference, because most of the time we weren't having that seat at the table as far as, creating efficiency. And then because of COVID, it was, those kind of stresses that come about, and creating that efficiency. And I think that's part of what I love to do, is that it's always like a puzzle. There's always something different. There's never the same thing twice. And it's just, at the end of the day, I try to make tomorrow better than today. And that's kind of what I've always told the executive team here, is my job is to be a bullpen. My job is to provide them with as many options as I can. And then they tell me which way they want to go and I'll make it happen. But my job is to provide as many options to allow the profitability of the company.
So I feel like people in your role often kind of get overlooked in that you just make things happen and we're just used to getting things when we need them and not really aware of all that goes into getting something produced, getting it packaged, getting it transported, getting it through customs and just all the different components. So I feel like unless there's a disaster, it's
Yeah.
kind of hard for people in your role to be understood and appreciated sometimes.
Yeah. The easiest way I sum it up is no one really knows what we do until we don't do it, because there's so many moving parts. It's not until something falls or something's missed does someone even realize that, oh, this wasn't done. At any given time, I have, probably dozens up to hundreds of shipments in transit. I have to monitor every single one of them. Did they clear customs? Or what milestone are they? Are they going to make the deadline that we have? Are we going to make the deadline for our customers? And all of those rolling things come into play that no one really sees in a day-to-day. It's only when something falls apart do they see that there's an impact. And I think that's where now, currently, kind of in a post-COVID, many companies have realized, hey, these can be integral in creating cost savings within the supply chain. Many times, I jokingly heard it said that innovation in supply chain is not squeezing your vendor for 3 or 4%. It's being able to work in a relationship with those vendors, knowing that you're putting constraints on them as well. In a post-COVID, they may not be able to get their raw materials as quickly as you want as a demand. So you're trying to work with them and, either having carrying inventory that you're supplying for them, or all the way up to, trying to offset anything for them by pre-buying a certain amount to have in-house so they can build in a faster timeline. We see that right now because we do a lot with the microchips because of the radios. So, the lead times, you see some of these things can be 50 all the way up to 90 weeks on certain chips. So your quarterly allocations are huge to the bottom line, and being able to get things efficiently where they need to be, is paramount at this time.
So, what does a day in the life of a director of logistics even look like? Like, how would you explain to some of our listeners who maybe haven't served in a role like you before, and maybe it's something that someone's interested in going into?
I think one of the biggest things is being comfortable being uncomfortable, because everything is never going to be perfect. Like I always, logistics supply chain to me is organized chaos. There's always going to be bumps. There's always going to be hurdles. And, if you look at it like a roller coaster ride for us, enthusiasts, I'm not trying to make this thrill ride that's flipping you upside down. I want that kiddie ride. I want the, knowing there's going to be highs and lows, but I'm going to try to minimize them. That yes, they're going to happen, but we can rebound very quickly when that happens. And I think, that, and it happens more frequently. Like right now, we have a shipment that all of a sudden, hey, this is on hold, or this isn't going to happen, or this is coming in early. And being able to make all those pivots where you need to be and keep things going forward is crucial. But also having somebody that knows how to do this is second. Like someone cannot just jump into this, because then it's just absolutely crazy. When I try to outline like what I do every single day and what has to be done every day just to be able to get these products from A to Z, most people would not even understand the complexities that exist with that. And I think, but it's something that, as someone that likes to be a problem solver, and I think that's why a lot of people in engineering truly do well, because you have that analytical mindset. You have this ability to say, okay, there's got to be some kind of methodology that I can put into play to minimize this. And, for me, I'm a statistical super freak. Anyone that knows me knows that. And not to say like everyone jokes about Excel sheets and supply chain. I do have Excel sheets, but most of mine are data driven. So I'm going into our ERP system and I'm clicking refresh data. I'm not creating this thing every single time I need to do it. I'm downloading a report and just hitting refresh data. There's my dashboard. So I am relying on Excel, but it's driven by data from our NetSuite system, that we use to provide those answers for me. But I can upload it and instantly get that update and measure, where's my report card? Am I doing okay? How are the shipments looking? Are there, I have mine that actually color code. So for shipment milestones, whether it's air or ocean, there's, multiple milestones when it's like getting to the port, port to port, customs, and then final delivery. I measure every one of those milestones, and they're color coded on my sheet. So if it's not plus or minus 1 day, it turns a different color, and that's where my focus needs to be. Everything that's green, there's no problem. Yellows and reds, we have a problem. And I think being proactive to those situations allows me to fix them before they become a problem, either for my company or customer facing. That if I'm monitoring these things ahead of time, I'm fixing them before they become a problem for anyone. I don't have to have a salesperson call their customer and say, hey, this isn't going to be in time, we can't make it, or hey, these are stuck in customs, I'm sorry, you're going to miss your deadline. To me, failure is not an option. And that, that the importance of that is now so more than ever, especially in, the situations that exist today.
So speaking of fixing things before they become a problem, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you've experienced in 2023? I know you and I have chatted about this several times before, but I think it's relevant to share with our audience today.
I think most of it, a big part is diversification within the company. So for us, we, as a lot of us have production in China plants and manufacturing, your HTS codes are up there, your tariffs are up there. So a lot of it is having the ability to work with your team and build out, can this be built in Hong Kong, Vietnam, Thailand, reducing that dependency in that area and what it affects. And what I always tell people to be mindful of is your total landed cost, which is the total cost to get that product from A to Z. And most people, and I think in bigger companies, lose sight of this because you may have a procurement team that's in California, but your ops teams are in New York City and they don't necessarily talk. So their little picture says everything's fine. And then they realize this thing costs an astronomical amount to get in the door. Because we bought that widget at this price, but the shipping, the transit, the tariffs costs now made that product, you have to raise your prices. But being cognizant of that and working with your procurement team, your ops, and even your sales is, having that ability to pivot in there and say, we can provide these options. But also, what a lot of times is the transit times, many times you have 30 or 60-day terms with the vendor. And at the height of COVID, when you were seeing 70 plus days, you were paying for stuff that you couldn't even sell. And that was a huge hit to a lot of companies. And I think that's what caused them to have layoffs and so forth, was they were outlaying a significant amount of cost for products they couldn't sell. So the speed to market is something that is, something that needs to really be, looked at. And as you look at evaluating your supply chain.
So all of this sounds very stressful to me. I'm thinking of crazy looking charts and graphs, the bald head. How do you manage stress?
It's strange, but I actually love it. To me, when you love what you do so much, to me, although there is stress, I love what I do every day. And I think that's what the big difference is I love coming in, and I kind of jokingly say it's like a Chicken Little movie. The sky's going to be falling to somebody, whether it's a sales, whether it's accounting, whether it's procurement. Someone's going to have a problem and the sky's going to fall and you need to fix it. And I think just coming in, knowing that those problems exist and knowing that you can help that person out and make their day a little bit easier, that stress to me, I enjoy my day-to-day stuff. So I have a better understanding of what's involved. So you have the momentary stresses, something stuck in customs, and customs is coming back saying, hey, this isn't an FDA hold and you're going to jump through hoops because this thing needs to be in a customer's doors in 4 days. Those are stressful moments. I deal with a lot of that now with stuff going into, say, Mexico. But it's not uncommon. And it's just a matter of who do I know? How many connections do I have in that industry that can help me fix that problem? And I think that's one of the biggest things is always learning and always having those connections, and that's why I love jumping on calls, is that you're always learning something new. You're always learning, because things change. I know a lot about, a little about a lot of things, if you will. And so one of the biggest things is always trying to learn something different. Like I try to learn not only just procurement, but now besides procurement, I'm trying to look at, okay, as a company that's owned by a private equity, how do they do their financing? How do I reverse engineer agreements I make with freight vendors that are advantageous to the company, based knowing how they want to do the payment structure? And I think having that better understanding of what happens before and after your desk is a very important part, because I don't want to do something that makes it easy for me, but makes it very difficult for the next person. And to me, that's not fair. And I don't think that's doing a proper job. So, one of the biggest things I say is, did I make everyone's position easier by doing what I did? Did they have less stress from the vendor? Did the warehouse have less stress in dealing with that shipment? One of the things we have with ocean shipments is it's called floor loaded. They pack and stuff these things to the gills. Well, when you're dealing with a container coming in Southern California, it's very hot in that container. It takes a while to unload it. So one of the biggest things I did was started to have some of our shipments palletized before they got in the container. Now, one person in 20 minutes can unload that container versus 2 or 3 people for 4 hours in a very hot container. Now, sometimes it's inevitable. You have certain things you have to do that. But in many cases, depending on how much volume I was shipping, I could have 20 pallets put in that container that now one person in 15 minutes with a fork truck can unload versus having to spend 4 people in a hot container. But I was thinking of that all the way at the origin point, not waiting for someone to say, hey, it's kind of unfair for the guys in the warehouse. I've been there. I know what that's like. So I'm trying to do everything I can do to make their jobs easier, because the faster that's into the building, the quicker it is for them to receive. And it's the faster for them to turn around and outbound sales that's now triggering revenue for the company. I'm not doing them any good if I'm just stuffing the stuff in a container, making them deal with it. And then you risk boxes being damaged because, you're talking container heights. You may step on a box to get another box, and those are the very things that you try to reduce, and having that understanding to making everything better for everyone in the organization.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that seems a little bit challenging is how you track your cost savings, because my guess is you are adding tremendous value to the bottom line by doing all of these things behind the scenes. But how do you actually prove and show the impact that you're having on revenue?
Oh, these are my spreadsheets. My boss laughs at me because she knows I literally update my sheets weekly. So if someone says, hey, what impact did you have the organization? It's like, okay, have a seat, because I keep graphs on these things. And what I say is, and a lot of times if you look at, say, ocean shipping right now, the container pricing dropped for everyone. So a lot of times I say, listen, I came in at 20,000, we're at 3,000. It's not, I saved you 17,000. It's what I show is what was the cost savings between what we paid and what's the spot market rate. And that delta between the two is what I say is the actual cost savings, because it's being fair. If you went on a spot market right now, what would the price you pay door to door for a 40-foot container? And if that price is X and I'm paying Y, that delta is what I say is the cost savings. And I track that by every single container. One of the biggest things I did was I compared Q1 2022 to Q1 2023. And it was funny when they look at the numbers, it was drastic. In the first quarter of 2022, they did 181 shipments and spent about $1 million. In Q1 2023, we did 3 shipments less. It was 179 shipments, I believe. And I only spent $350,000. So that, the amount of shipping volume didn't change, but my ability to be able to help connect those dots for them and say, we can ocean this, you can air this, or we can do a mix. Let's air 2 pallets of that shipment to get no back orders in the system, keep the customer happy, and then do that mix. And then also, your HTS classifications, China's, stuff that you're paying 25% on, reclassifying those. So some of the stuff I successfully got from 25% to 12 or 7.5. And if you're talking about a particular product line that you may buy $10 million worth in that year, paying 25% as a tariff versus 12 is a significant cost savings. And I'm able to track the dates of when certain stuff changes. Also exclusions as the stuff has changed with the 301 within those things. So all those things you're able to show, even on your domestic shipping, your UPS parcel contracts, what you were spending before, what you're spending now, and where you were able to save rating. A lot of times people, if they looked at their UPS contract, like 60 pages of mind-numbing numbers and percentages. And for someone like me, I go through and highlight them. I'll go through there and be like, this, no, 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 here, send this back to them, fix that. Same thing with the freight carriers. They'll send something, they know I'm very, very detailed where, hey, I want this cost, this is, or no. But in exchange for that, they're getting more business than they normally got. So I'm able to work with these vendors to say, hey, there needs to be a value add on both sides. And, we sort of had a conversation about this yesterday, that I'm providing more business for them, but at the same time, I'm understanding what they're up against. But now they're able to say, okay, if we meet them here, we're now going to get 10 or 15% more shipments from the organization based on that. So their actual net revenue gain from me as a customer grew, even though they may be doing a little bit less on that margin per shipment. But also having the understanding that they don't have to wait for a commercial invoice. They don't have to wait for paperwork. It is in the day that shipment is picked up, no questions asked. So I'm making a lot of what they would have as a time sapper from a customer go away, so that it balances out with that. But also just in talks with them, as a value add, they may come to me and say, hey, John, we're trying to get into this customer. They won't say the name, but they'll say we're having a tough time getting past that gatekeeper because we think their problem is X, but they're turning us down. And a lot of times I'm able to help them say, okay, you're not going about this correctly. You're trying to do that. Oh, we're going to find that pain point. Well, they have pain every single day. It's not a question of, are you going to solve their pain point? No, it's going to be, what do you got to explain how you're different from the normalcy that they're doing now. And what is that cost savings going to be like? Going with the status quo, going with this is the way it's always been done. That's costing them X right now. Your problem comes in over here. You need to explain that difference. What the cost is to not make this change. What the cost is to not adapt this technology, and what it would mean to them in years 1 through 5. And I think that's kind of one of the big things that I've helped with the vendors that I work with. And that's why, I have them jump on calls and, hey, can you jump? No problem. Because of having an understanding. Now, when I ask them to do something, it's not as a crazy of an ask as the customer that treats them transactional. You're just a number. It's, what have you done for me today? Here's your number. Here's your money. Go, I'm only going to call you again when I need something. And not having that and not treating things like that has allowed me to get much better relationships with these carriers, to the point that, I'm able to help them out in many cases.
What about an innovation or some new advancement that stands out that you think is going to have a big impact in your space?
I think, we talked about it before with AI. I think AI is going to have a very good contributing factor, because I think you can use AI to help take away what I would consider to be a time sapper of my day. What's menial tasks that take up time that I might be able to push off. Hey, AI, generate me a bill of lading from here to here. That kind of generative AI down the road saves you time to be able to focus on other things, but also having not the fear of it. I don't think it's going to completely, AI is based on data. And, as we know with the mutual friend, if the data is dirty, it's no good. And that AI is now no longer useful. But if you have the correct data set in what you're doing, it can really make an improvement as a value add to an organization. And I think that's what a lot of people really need to start looking at, is what is the value add versus the value detracting that you think you're going to lose jobs. No, I think, yes, it will replace some people, but that's going to be a decision a company makes. But I think there's a lot of value add to a company in doing that, but understanding it's derived on data sets. So if there's not a ton of data in that spot, there's not much you can really do. And I think that's why it's affected other areas like customer service or sales first, because there's far more data than when you look at logistics. Like, you have to understand this thing with a fine tooth comb. And if it doesn't quite understand those dots, it will literally tell you, I don't understand this. Can you give me more? So it's kind of like, I have friends that will jokingly say they're trying to stump the AI, and ask it a question about logistics or supply chain that it can't figure out. And it's based on those data sets. So I think AI is something that definitely is coming. and definitely in its infancy stage. But if done correctly, I think it could be a tremendous resource for company and for individuals. If you're able to not have to spend an hour or two a day doing something, and you're able to focus on other things, learn a new task that helps you become more valuable to your organization, that's where I think a lot of this could come into play.
So we're going to move into what I call our Spitfire round, where I'm going to say something and you're going to respond with the first word or phrase that comes to mind.
Oh boy. Okay.
Accomplishment you are most proud of?
I would say helping someone that was recent. I did a post on it. It was a career impact that someone that didn't report to me, and I got a thank you card from that person. And I think that is something that is the most proudest for me, is that I'm able to impact a younger person's career advancement to the point that they took a time to give me a thank you card, and that I helped make that impact.
Quality you admire most in yourself?
Problem solving.
What's your dream?
Retire to Disney.
Biggest pet peeve?
Oh, lack of focus and direction.
What are you binging?
Oh, my daughter has me rewatching Originals, Vampire Diaries, some of those ones. So it's on those moments, I'll watch those with my daughter.
Bucket list item you are going to accomplish this year?
I actually just accomplished it by doing my Disney annual pass holder. It was a dream, to be able to do. Younger, wasn't able to go to Disney. The first time I went to Disney was my junior year in high school for a robotics competition. And I hadn't gone again until after having kids. So it was a dream to be able to have that pass holder card, get that little magnet. And, I pulled that trigger a couple months ago. So that was a bucket list accomplishment for me.
Well, John, thank you for being with us today. For our listeners, we will be back as always next month.
Yep, thank you for having me.